Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosemarie Ferrante, and I am a family lawyer in Connecticut. I focus my practice solely on non-adversarial divorce. And today we're having a discussion. We're continuing CCND's series of discussions on divorce in Connecticut. The Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce is Connecticut's statewide nonprofit professional organization of Connecticut mediators and collaborative divorce professionals. Our membership includes attorneys, mental health professionals, and financial specialists. Our mission is to change the way people divorce or separate in Connecticut by reducing conflict and improving the lives of family members, especially children. So today we're joined by the president and vice president of CCND, as well as one of our board members. Jennifer Louise Champagne is a licensed professional counselor whose practice is devoted exclusively to the emotional and parenting issues of divorce. Over the past 30 years, she's focused her work with parents as they address the changing needs of their family, coaching parents as they share the decision to divorce with their children, creating parenting plans for the time of separation, and addressing communication challenges that impact parents and their children. Michael Conway is an attorney who represents parties in divorce matters, custody and visitation actions, as well as parental rights matters. Attorney Conway also serves as a guardian ad litem in divorce and custody matters. For over 30 years, he has volunteered his time to resolving family law matters by serving as a special master in Waterbury, Litchfield, and formerly at the Regional Family Law Docket and Bridgeport courts. While Attorney Conway still litigates, he is a trained divorce mediator and a collaborative divorce professional. And lastly, we're joined by Dr. Beth Karassik. She's a licensed psychologist with broad-based experience, which spans almost 30 years in the clinical and forensic psychology and neuropsychology. She's committed to supporting children, adults, and families in creating new possibilities for the future and transforming their lives in ways that align with the fulfillment of their dreams and serves their best interests. Her background in neuropsychology gives her insight into how the brain affects emotions and decision-making during difficult times like divorce. So in her collaborative divorce practice, she works with families as a divorce coach and child specialist. Hello, everybody. That was a mouthful. How are you?
Hello. Very good.
Hello.
So today we're going to be talking about parenting plans. It's an integral part of the divorce process. Before we get started, Jennifer, as president of CCND, can you just give us a little brief overview of CCND and its mission?
Sure. Thank you, Rosemarie. At CCND, we are an umbrella organization throughout the state of highly trained attorneys, financial professionals, and mental health practitioners who are all dedicated to hoping to help families work together through their divorce process in a non-adversarial way. Our organization has a high level of training requirements for all of our members so that when the public is looking for a professional to help them with the emotional, financial, and legal aspects of their divorce, we would like them to be able to come to our website and help them to look for a professional who will be able to guide them through those areas, knowing that they're reaching out to somebody who does have the experience and knowledge base of those non-adversarial processes, which are mediation and collaborative divorce.
Thank you. So as I had mentioned in Attorney Conway's intro, he does still litigate. And so he has the pulse on what's happening in the courtroom and in the courthouses across the state. So while many of us as divorce professionals and Attorney Conway as well in his practice try to keep people out of court, we want to just quickly address what's happening quickly. You like that? Quickly address what's happening in the courthouse due to the pandemic.
Thank you. Prior to the pandemic, if someone brought an action in court, they could expect to be in court within 30 to 40 days and get in front of a judge and have matters heard regarding parenting, if there were visitation issues or if there were custody issues. Once the pandemic hit, that all stopped. All the courts were closed. There was no hearings. There was the courts were trying to transition from you're closed to having people virtual, and that took some time. And what ended up happening was a lot of people ended up not seeing their children. There was a lot of difficulty because of issues with COVID and wearing masks and all those issues that came with it. So the court transitioned into what is now currently known as a track system. A pathway process is what they call it. And there are essentially three tracks. A track A, which means that the parties are pretty much going to resolve the issues quickly and they don't need the court's attention. Track B, which is a more complex matter, but it will take up some of the court's time, but they don't expect it to be too difficult. And then there's a track C, which is a track that puts people who are fighting over custody or more complex issues in the divorce, and that's going to take up more of the court's time. So the court will figure out which track each case is going to be on, and then set the appropriate timetables and schedules for them. That's currently the status, and it's still needs some work, but that's what the litigants can expect if they don't mediate or go through collaborative.
So if they do go through mediation or collaborative, what's the level of the court's involvement?
Well, in the mediation process and the collaborative process, the courts are generally not involved at all. And in fact, in the collaborative process, it's agreed that we're not going to go to court and that we're going to resolve all the issues on our own. And that's generally a better way to handle it, because you have both the parents sitting in a room talking about what's in the best interest of the kids right away. They're not going to court and fighting it out in front of a judge. And you'll see that there's a lot more flexibility. Parenting plans are being written up. People are following them. And it really is in the best interest of the children to get those kind of issues resolved quickly.
So in the old days, which was just 2 years ago, once people came to a final resolution and had a separation agreement, whether they got there through mediation or collaborative divorce, they ultimately had to have an uncontested hearing. Can you just tell everybody what's going on with that right now once there is a final agreement through a non-adversarial process?
The cases now are e-filed, which means that all of the paperwork is now just scanned in and sent to the court. Instead of being in front of a judge, you sign an affidavit answering all the questions that a judge would ask you. Do you think the agreement is fair? Do you understand it? Have you had enough time to talk to your attorney about it? Do you think that the agreement is in the best interest of the minor children? And so you check off all the boxes, you sign your affidavit, and then you will upload everything. And then within, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, within a few days to a few weeks, you'll have your divorce, and you will not have to appear in front of a court.
Great. So let's pivot then to our amazing mental health professionals who are here. CCND professionals promote non-adversarial divorce processes ultimately to benefit the children. And so when we're talking about parenting plans and just non-adversarial processes in general, can either of you, Jennifer or Beth, share in what ways the non-adversarial process benefits the children?
Who goes?
Either one of you. Beth, why don't you start?
Right, I'll start. It's really right there in the label, like in the title of our organization, being a non-adversarial divorce. And what I mean by that is it turns out there's more and more being understood on the psychological effects of traumatic events or difficult times on people. And what's really what we're coming to understand is that it's no one event in and of itself that necessarily causes harm or later, like after effects of a trauma or an upset, but it really is, it's people have it, that there's a traumatic event and that the child or the person feels alone in it and didn't have a place to go to talk or to have a hug or to have some connection with people through it. So that's really, for me, that's really a powerful and important lesson for parents or for all of us, the professionals trying to help the parents, is that a non-adversarial approach, so mediation or collaborative divorce, really provides for the parent the space for consciously choosing to go through this in a non-adversarial way, like not being against. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean that it's devoid of emotions or people aren't upset. People are very upset going through a divorce usually. and it's a difficult adjustment for everyone. But if the parents can be basically kind of at their best, or that we as the professionals are helping parents be going through this with the least tension and the least conflict possible, then that's going to allow the parents to have the wherewithal and the state of mind to be able to be present for their children, so that then children going through it with their families are not left alone. Like there's more ability, they'll be in contact with the parents and they'll be able to talk, or say there'll be some more freedom to be taken care of really through the process. That's
So
a lot how I think of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you shared, which is it's not easy. Divorce is never easy, but one of my favorite quotes is that conflict is inevitable, but combat is optional. So maybe Jennifer, you could share, how do you help the parents who are going through such a difficult time kind of remember that and put the best interest of their kids first when talking about, not only how they're going to parent, which they've never had to co-parent before, how they're going to share time, which nobody wants to lose time with their children. So how do you help families with all of those fears that they're having?
That's a really good question, because the whole concept of what is this going to look like after, many times parents don't think about, how do we get to being divorced? They know the process. There's legal things that need to be done and decisions need to be reached. However, what do these children and their family look like once they are actually divorced? And that is just the conversations about, what do your children need? What continuations of their daily schedules or their routines? How do parents continue to respond to what the children, their questions, their homework, their activities, their emotional issues that come up on a day-to-day basis? How do parents respond to those things? So by working with the parents through the process, it goes beyond coming up with a schedule. It goes to, how do we envision the children's lives, and what are your goals as parents, and what are the interests that you have? One of the things that I like to remind parents is, it goes beyond what the parents want or need, because of course every parent wants their child with them as much as they can. But if we can take a step back and look at it from the child's perspective, and often what the children want is very simple: a very good relationship with both parents. And through talking with the parents, trying to help them look at it through a different lens, often helps them get to where it is that they need to get to have their family go from being a one-home model to a two-home model, but the continuation of that family concept.
Thank you. We're going to break down a little bit more about schedules and about decision making, but maybe we should start at square one. So, Michael, could you share just some of the general, well, not general, what is a parenting plan for people who don't know? What are the things that you need to start thinking about in terms of your parenting plan? What are the main components?
Well, I think there's two main components. One is the custody component. Are you going to share joint decision making, which we call joint legal custody? And most families, even if they're in conflict, agree that they should share major decisions about their children's lives together. Not one parent can make a decision without consulting with the other parent. Major decisions such as education, medical, religious, do they get a driver's license, things of those natures. It's really not that difficult. Most people agree on a joint legal custody. So who's the decision making is the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it, and it really is not related, is what's the parenting plan going to be? Is it going to be every other weekend? One parent sees the children with some midweek visits. Is it going to be a shared physical custody where it's sharing of time equally? Or is it going to be something that's more suited for their schedule? And a lot of times it's dictated by the parents' schedule and sometimes the children's schedules, depending upon how old they are. And I think those are the two things you really need to consider when you're thinking about a parenting plan.
Thank you. So when we're talking about scheduling, Beth, would you share a little bit about how developmental stages of children impact what that schedule really should look like? Oh, you're on mute still. How'd that happen?
Sorry about that. I did it because I thought some noise was being created, maybe. Sure. So there come to be some generally accepted sort of standard ways to share time in a parenting plan. And of course, when people are interested in perfectly share, I really caution people about not starting to count hours and figure out if it's precisely the same amount of hours. But the idea is you want to share life with your child and they want to share it with you. So there are generally accepted ways to carve out the weeks that usually, since weeks are composed of 7 days and not so evenly divided, that over the course of 2 weeks, there'll be a repetition of some of the patterns. So for younger children generally, and there are a lot of different factors to take into account, but generally younger children will spend shorter amounts of time so they're not separated from a parent for too long a span of time. There are plans that shift three nights, 3 days with one parent, 4 days with the next, and then the following week, 4 days with that first parent and 3 days with the next. There's a structure to it that goes 2, 2, 5, and 5. But generally it's shorter periods for younger children. Older children, teens sometimes have like a week at a time. Week 1 is mom, week 1 is one parent, week 2 is the other parent, and alternate that way. It's very standard to have alternating weekends. There are just so many factors to consider in terms of parents' work schedules, children's schedules, how close, what's the proximity of the parents' homes? So like how easy is it to be going back and forth? How good are the parents at being together or communicating? Because you want to minimize any sources or any, you want to minimize the time that there's tension or conflict. How able is the child to handle the back and forth? So there are many factors, but developmentally, generally, younger children, shorter amounts of time to not be away, and older children, generally those spans of time get longer. And then there are specific arrangements about phone calls and different ways to have contact as time goes on.
Well, I love what you shared about, hoping people and counseling people to avoid this, like, let's count times. I think we've probably all had clients who want 50-50, will not take a second less, but it doesn't even work for their life, right? And so, a parenting plan can be whatever works for that family. I've had, and I'm sure you guys have, workers whose shifts change every 2 weeks. I once had an 8-week plan and it had to rotate given the dad's, I think he was a firefighter, his schedule. And so what works for one family isn't going to necessarily work for the other. Jennifer or Michael, do you have anything to add to the scheduling and that part of the parenting plan? Any challenges you've seen or guidelines that you try to reinforce with your clients?
One of the things that I always try to ask parents to think about is how applicable it is as to what it is that they're going to look at. I love that Beth brought up the proximity of homes and schedules. Especially with those younger children, it may be very difficult for them to transition at awkward times as they're getting ready for bed, that they're getting tired. It just maybe they're all cozy playing with something and then they're being asked to transition between homes. So as we give consideration to those parenting plans, really back to that vantage of what is it going to feel like for your child? Is it going to be logical? Are they going to be in the car for 45 minutes 2 ways during a school day when they have homework and activities to do? And how practical is that going to be for them, despite the best intentions of wanting to be able to spend as much time with the child as possible?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Great. So one of the other components of the parenting plan is the decision making. And Michael, you addressed that, and true, I think in most instances, especially in the non-adversarial matters that we're working with, people understand they have to and they want both parents' involvement in major decisions. But major decisions are somewhat limited in that they're medical, their education, but other than routine, and I have this discussion a lot with my clients, there's those routine, like, can you go to your friend's house and when to do your homework? But there is such a myriad of decisions that are middle of the ground that may not rise to major, but are certainly more than routine. So as a matter of course, do you all talk to your clients about those decisions? And do you include or encourage them to include, how are you going to communicate about these things?
I think it's impossible to write a parenting plan that takes into consideration everything that may happen in these people's lives or in these kids' lives. So, and I think you hit on it. If there's a situation that arises that's kind of in the middle of the road, as you were saying, then you have a notice requirement. We're thinking of taking 2 weeks taking 2 days out of state to go to my relative's house or something like that. Well, and I need to pull the child out of school for 1 day to do that. That's kind of one of those, on the margins as far as a major decision, but the other party should know about it, and so that it doesn't get abused. So oftentimes we'll say that these things can be made with notice to the other side. These decisions can be made with, 24 hours notice or whatever, so they can know about it. But it's so hard to figure out every little thing that might happen, and that goes really to the parent's ability to co-parent. Some parents, it's not going to be an issue. Other parents, emotion's going to get filed because Johnny got taken out of school early, and that shouldn't have happened.
Right. And I do think that we see, I always talk to people about, there's going to likely be disagreements. Married people disagree, divorced families disagree, but I try to include a framework for what are those decisions. Yeah. How are you going to get together and discuss it? Are you going to bring in the help of a mental health professional or a mediator or a co-parenting counselor? What are the steps we can take so no one's running to court if they're home an hour late, or if somebody made a decision that the other parent didn't necessarily agree with? So what you're nodding, Beth, do you have something to add?
No, that's a great point, Rosemarie. I mean, you usually, or maybe always, there's a paragraph or a statement in there that if they can't come to a decision, like if there's an impasse or they just really can't decide, that they agree to return to mediation or return to one of the professionals they were working with. But I find lately I'm doing a little more work with them together, even though this may or may not be in the court document, because the court can't necessarily enforce this. But the people really think through, how are we what's the process for us discussing and coming to those agreements? So because saying, okay, we'll go back and talk to Beth, we'll go back and talk to Jen and figure that out if we really can't decide, it's almost still a setup for that you're like one side or the other and against each other. It's just like a mild sort of non-adversarial thing. So anyway, I'm just supporting what you said, or I agree with that in terms of helping them think through, well, a phone call's okay, or no, I really want to sit down and talk in person, or just really more specifically, how do they resolve conflict or come to decisions with each other?
And I want to jump off something you said and maybe ask Jennifer her opinion about this. So there are discussions that we sometimes have with soon to be former spouses or parents, co-parents, about things that aren't necessarily enforceable. So oftentimes we might have two kids who are in high school and one who's in college. Well, just because he or she is in college and 18 and not legally a part of this agreement, what are we going to pretend the kid doesn't exist? You're still going to talk about what are the expectations for Christmas break when they come home, or the other holidays. So in my opinion, it's important to have these conversations, even if they're almost these good faith discussions about expectations to align with these situations that, again, may not be enforceable. What are your thoughts on that, Jennifer?
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think it's really important for parents to have the conversations of what that impact will be when you may have different age groups of children, like you were saying, of college versus high school. But from a general co-parenting perspective, It's easy when parents don't agree to say, well, it's fine. Mom's house will do it this way, and the other parent's house will do it that way. But really being able to pause and say, okay, if we do things very differently, what's the experience going to be for my child? Is that going to cause the child stress? Is that going to cause the child to be nervous if they know that parent one feels one way and parent two feels the other way? So while they're going through these processes and planning, to try and help them come up with a way to align on the big things and have a little bit of autonomy on the ones that aren't as important, to really reduce the negative impact on a child.
Yeah.
So we didn't even get to vaccines and masking, and we only have a couple of minutes left. So maybe you can each share, one of your top priorities in a parenting plan. Is there a certain provision? And I can start while you're thinking for a moment, just about that framework, communication, how parents are going to communicate. Is it more comfortable for them via text, via phone, once a week, scheduling, using a co-parenting app? How are they going to continue to communicate post-divorce about their children? Anyone else have some thoughts?
Well, one of the things that I like to make sure is in there is really clarity about how vacations are going to run, being very specific on days and when there's it impedes a weekend or things that are special circumstances, just spelling things out and just being mindful so that they don't have 11th hour conflicts.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. I think that the holidays can be such a difficult time for people, and especially the kids, because they have such an expectation on certain holidays. And to make sure that's crystal clear so they can enjoy their times with both parents or their families, that they know what's going to happen, where they're going to be, so that they can really enjoy it without having to worry.
Any last thoughts, Beth?
Yeah, I was really same thing. The specifics, like being clear without being too picky, and the whole idea of like really feet on the ground, like really living with this. So on Christmas morning, you're going to go here and then there and then there and then there, like really imagining the real life stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think the takeaway is that parenting plans have to, first and foremost, take into consideration the children's needs, and it has to be flexible enough to deal with the unexpected, but durable enough to sort of last and have a framework for how you're going to co-parent. Thank you, Jennifer, Michael, and Beth, so much. I think we went over, but CCND, check out our website, agooddivorce.com. Is that right, Jennifer?
Good Divorce CT.
Good Divorce
CT.
CCND. Thank you so much. We hope to see everybody again soon.
Okay, thanks, Rosemarie.